You ever get that feeling that your mind has already made up before you've even really started thinking about something? Well, today, we're diving into the invisible frames, the words and images that secretly shape our reality, guiding our thoughts before the real conversation even gets going.
So let me start with a question for you. How is it possible that changing just one single word in the description of a problem can completely flip the kind of solutions people come up with? I know, it sounds like a trick question, but the answer? Well, the answer is what this is all about.
Okay, check this out. There was this fascinating study at Stanford University. Researchers gave people the exact same statistics about a city's rising crime rate, but they changed one little word. For half the participants, they described crime as a beast. For the other half, crime was a virus. And the results? Whoa, they were staggering. The beast group? They wanted more police, more prisons, capture and punish. But the virus group? They went in a totally different direction. They focused on treatment, things like social reform, education, finding the root causes.
Just think about that for a second. The facts, the actual data didn't change at all, but the solutions people came up with were miles apart. Why? Because that one little metaphor acted as an invisible frame. It guided their thinking down a specific path before they even had a chance to really analyze the problem.
So how does this invisible frame actually work? To really get to the bottom of this, we need to turn to the work of influence expert Robert Cialdini and his really groundbreaking concept, persuasion. So what is persuasion? Well, to put it simply, it's all about setting the stage. Cialdini calls it creating a privileged moment. It's that little window of time where you can guide someone's attention to a particular idea, making them more open to your message before you've even delivered it.
And this quote from Cialdini himself just nails it. The most persuasive part of a message isn't always the message itself. It's what comes right before it. It's about getting the mental landscape ready, pointing an audience's attention toward concepts that will naturally line up with what you're about to say.
So that leads us to the big question, right? How do you actually create these privileged moments? Well, let's open up the toolkit, and we're going to start with maybe the most powerful framing tool we have, metaphors.
And trust me, this isn't just some academic theory. Let's look at our real-world example, Alberta Health Services, a huge, award-winning healthcare system. They made a very deliberate choice to basically re-engineer their internal language to change their entire company culture.
And the logic behind it, as their conference chairperson Steve Barney explained, was so simple but so profound. He said, "Hey, we're an organization dedicated to healing. It makes no sense for us to use the language of violence. The metaphors we use every day have to match our core mission."
And look at how they actually did this. This is the really cool part. It wasn't just some memo telling people to be more positive. No, they systematically found all those common violent business metaphors and actively swapped them out for metaphors about achievement. So instead of attacking a problem, their teams would approach an issue. Instead of beating the competition, they would outdistance competitors. It's a small shift, but it's huge. It persuaded the entire organization to frame their work not as a fight, but as a race toward excellence.
All right, so this framing principle, it goes way beyond just the words we choose. The next tool in our toolkit shows how even super subtle, almost invisible visual cues can have a massive impact.
Let me tell you about this Canadian study. Researchers looked at a group of university fundraisers working at a call center, and they wanted to see if they could persuade them to be more successful without, saying anything at all.
And what they did was so simple it's almost funny. For half the fundraisers, they just put a small picture of a runner winning a race on their instruction sheet. That's it. That was the only change. And the result? The group that just saw that image of achievement raised an incredible 60% more money. That tiny incidental picture persuaded their brains for success.
So, let's take all of this and put it in one of the highest stakes arenas you can imagine, the courtroom. How does a lawyer use persuasion to tell a story to a jury where the frame they build can literally change someone's life?
And this brings us right back to where we started, to that whole beast versus virus thing. As socio-trial expert Professor Brandon Blankenship explains, a good trial lawyer uses this technique all the time. If they want to prime a jury for punishment, they'll use those beast metaphors, framing the defendant as something that needs to be caged. But if they want to prime them for reform, they'll switch to virus metaphors, getting the jury to think about the social conditions that need treatment. The evidence comes later, but it's all seen through that powerful, pre-persuasive frame.
So the big takeaway here is that this isn't magic, it's a craft. Drawing on these ideas, Professor Blankenship basically developed a storyteller's checklist. You You start by priming your opening with your main theme. Then you scatter little associative cues, like that photo of the runner, to keep reinforcing it. You sequence your scenes for contrast. You control the timing and pauses to guide emotion, and you build your own credibility with really precise details. It's a whole toolkit for shaping a narrative on purpose.
But, and this is a really important but, once you see how powerful these tools are, it brings us to a huge final point, the ethics of it all.
I mean, let's be real. The power to direct someone's attention is pretty much the power to shape their reality. These same tools can absolutely be used to clarify things, to engage people, to help them understand complex ideas, but they can just as easily be used to manipulate, to hide the truth, and to distort what people believe. And that choice, that's always on the person doing the communicating.
So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you can see the invisible frames being built around you every single day, and now that you have the tools to build them yourself, how are you going to choose to use them?